समझ जी चले गए फ़ज़ा में आप लोग.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So I was asking if the telecast broadcast has begun.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع فإن خفتم ألا تعدلوا فواحدة أو ما ملكت أيمانكم ذلك أدنى ألا تعولوا. और अगर तुम ये खौफ रखते हो कि यतीमों के बारे में इंसाफ से काम नहीं ले सकोगे.
This is chapter An-Nisaa, that is chapter 4 and verse 4, and Huzur is reading the translation that if you fear that the society and if you fear that you, the society, may fail to do justice in matters concerning orphans in the aftermath of war, then marry women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4. And if you fear you will not deal justly, then marry only one or what your right hands possess. That is the nearest way for you to avoid injustice. This is a verse about which we are doing the commentary. Huzur saying that yesterday I spoke about Masla wa Thulatha wa Ruba, and I read to you a note from Palestine in which it had been said that Arabs do not have use other letters, numbers as well, and that is fifth and sixth, and I then said that it was that style of writing is different and this is different, and I said that perhaps there's been a mistake in the understanding of Imam Razi, because he said that Arabs don't even use you can't say a 5 in this particular sense of the word. You can't say 5 and 6, you can only say up to 4. So in Palestine they said, the letter said that it can be done, but then further research was done by Sayyid Abdul Hayy Sahib and Sayyid Hafiz Muzaffar Ahmad Sahib, and he's saying this is not really to do with the mainstream discussion, but we have to do it because it has been begun. Because it's been begun, so we should continue with it. As I was saying, Hafiz Sahib have shown with detailed discussions that there are other usages, discussions over other usages have been done, but the summary of his discussion is that mostly those who have taken up this view that this is better, that is not due to, they only say it from the dictionary point of view, and in opposition to them they say that you are only expressing an opinion. In the Arabs, and this, you do not see this used practically and collectively or in majority, that the poets who were before the Holy Prophet ﷺ or the writers before him, that there is no usage is found of this word, the words above ruba. So there is one thing called semai, which semai means that something which if we found in our own lifetime, we saw it used. So in that regard 4 is the last number, and then the next group mentions that quotation from Mutanabbi, and he said that he has used the word, who was asking which word it was. Mazur Singh, where's Hafiz Sahib's note? Huzur is asking where the Mutanabbi is mentioned. A famous poet, Humayat Asadi, is being mentioned. Mutanabbi has used the word Sudas, but the people have regarded this as being incorrect. So Hariri has also criticized this. The Arab writers, he has a great quality. And Maqamat Hariri is supposed to be unparalleled in their expertise, and he has not accepted this to be correct, and this usage of that. So according to grammar, to invent something is different, but as far as the usual usage of the word is concerned, that is something totally different. So the in summary, this one can arrive at the conclusion that this is Imam Razi was absolutely correct, that among the literary people of Arabs, after Ruba, there is no, you don't, that is four. You don't use the word five in that sense of the word, and then the verses that he has presented doesn't have the subject of 5 and 6. Only 6 and 7 has been used in the same kind of balance. So Huzur is saying that Masna wa Salasa wa Ruba, these words 2 or 3 or 4, this style has not been used in this sense by poets. For example, Huzur saying that, for example, people don't say khumasa, and that means that they multiplied something, which Huzur saying that who then who multiplies things terms by 5, but Huzur referring to the verses, and he's saying that there doesn't seem to be a 5 in that particular verse that's been mentioned, but that is not a very literal and an expert verse. Arabs, literary Arabs, have not used khamsa or anything like that. And Allah has also in the Holy Quran has mentioned with reference to angels, it is said arba, only gone up to 4. So that is that people who have 1 or 2 wings or 3 wings or 2 wings or 4 wings with reference to angels, and doesn't mention any more than that. So it is saying that I shall present to you references. I was presenting to you references of 2 English commentators, and I felt like praying for them, and I expressed the desire that I would feed. I'm sorry, I would like to meet them. So he's saying that, but he was called late, so obviously he's passed away. So he's saying that I didn't know much about it, so we sent them a message. The Rabwa researchers a message, and we asked them who these people were, and the answer of that has been received. So I should present this before you. Bosworth Smith, assistant master in health school, assistant headmaster. It says his book is Muhammad and Mohammedanism. 4 lectures delivered at the Royal Institute, London, in 1874. It's a very old story. He's written it a long time ago. So they're saying that the time which at that time, he's saying that when there were such Orientalists who were so prejudiced, so for him to declare something so with such intelligence and defending the Holy Prophet ﷺ is a great pious deed. And in this regard, they should always remain beloved of the Muslims. Bosworth Smith, I think Huzur said. And as far as the prayer is concerned, apart from funeral, Huzur saying that these people should be remembered in your prayers, because they have defended the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And Huzur saying Godfrey Higgins, I think Huzur said, this is another gentleman. He lived in Yorkshire. He was an archaeologist. His subject was asking how do you say archaeologist in Urdu. He was a resident of Doncaster, which is in Yorkshire. An apology from Muhammad he wrote in 1829, and the Prophet ﷺ, he was around the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and about him it has been discovered that he was a Nazarite. He belonged to that Christian sect where you find very few people who belonged to that sect, but he was a monotheist, and he did not see Jesus as an individual separate from the Bible who had presented a new religion. They were against Trinity. They were monotheists, and they regarded him as Jesus as a prophet among the Jews, and the Quran mentions them as Nasrani. And one of the reasons is that despite the fact that according to Islamic definition, those people are included in it, which afterwards started to believe in Trinity, and they began to believe in atheism. So when the Holy Quran speaks of the Nasrani, the reason is that in the beginning they were Nasrani, and the name Christian was not even present. They were Nasrani, who were those who listened to Jesus, and when they became spoiled, then they became Christians, and they adopted the name of Christ. But the real word Nasrani, it doesn't just have to do with Nazareth. It has to do with Nahnu Ansarullah, which says in the Holy Quran that we will be your friend, when Jesus asked for it. So if you were saying that those people who declared Nahnu Ansarullah, they would be from among them. So he was saying this is interesting for us, because when Jesus said, "Man ansari ilallah," who will help me for the sake of Allah? And they responded and said that Nahnu ansarullah, we are the ones who will help Allah. So Nuzul is saying that it is definitely mentioned that the monotheists were the Nasranis or Nazarenes or Ammonites. Who were saying, I've expressed about this, research about this, that perhaps they would be found in Mesopotamia, which is the north of Iraq, and perhaps in the middle as well, but mostly in the northern areas, in the mountains. These people belonging to the olden era, they are found. Some of them are found. So if people should investigate, and a lot of the literature has been made to disappear, and which had many things about in favor of this Islam and the Holy Quran. So wherever an Ahmadi is able to do this, he should search for the Bible of the Nasranis, and because of that there'll be you'll have a weapon to fight their arguments. And so he was saying that Nazarenes were present in the 19th century, and we should find out from here as to whether there are still any churches here that they have, and do they have whether they have any organized Jamaat or not, and it could also be that they have some literature which shows their names, and also the thing find out about their family. This college's guy, Dr. Higgins, his family would be in Doncaster, and perhaps he has a personal library, and from there we might find some very important things. I was asking why he's hiding it. Is there anything new in there? I was saying these are not matters which relate to this. I was saying that are they still alive? I was saying that out of his heirs there might be someone. If there is, then you should contact them and try to go to visit these authors' houses and try to look at the libraries and see what books they have, because we have found very little writings on this as to what the original Nazarene Bible was, and what was the nature of their arguments with each other. So he said, Huzur was saying that I told the research group to work on this, but the stuff that is found is very is not enough, and we need to have more. He wrote another book. He intended to make another book, and the manuscript and other things of that should be found there. So Huzur is saying that I'm keen to know about this book that he says he had intended to exhibit in future. In a future book. He intended to exhibit in a future book the Christianity of Jesus. Right from his own mouth, he claimed to be a Christian regarding our Lord as a Nazarite. So I think it's the same thing. The national biography by somebody, Stephen, I think Huzur said. Huzur was saying that this quotation that I was reading, Huzur was saying how far had I got? Did I read up to here? Huzur was saying, okay. Huzur was saying whose reference is it right now that I've been reading? But we have to deal with facts as they are. I said this yesterday, I read this yesterday, facts as they are, and it is a fact that slavery has coexisted with Christianity, nay, has professed to justify itself by Christianity even till this 19th century. Now the Mosaic law, so far from prohibiting polygamy, did not even put any limitation on it. The patriarchs indulged in polygamy, so did the judges, so did the kings, and not least so the more elevated and the more spiritually minded amongst them. He says that as far as Mosaic law is concerned, instead of instead of having any teaching against, containing any teaching against polygamy, Moses' Mosaic law did not put any limitation to the number of wives someone could have. So he didn't introduce it. He didn't even leave an upper limit. Indeed, he says the patriarchs indulge in polygamy, and the great religious leaders, the church, heads of the churches, etc., the patriarchs, in them the polygamy is found, and judges the era which comes at the time of David, after David and Solomon, is called the era of of Judges. In that as well is a part of the Old Testament, and Salatin is also a book. So saying you must have seen in English we say Judges and Kings. So did the judges, so did the kings, and not least so the most elevated and the more spiritually minded amongst them. He says that in the same way did the kings used to do, and the most important, although it's been mentioned right at the end, though whoever was spiritually at a higher status and had a spiritual mind, in them as well this polygamy is mentioned. The man after God's own heart, in the king whose wisdom and magnificence still forms the folklore of so many Eastern countries, can hardly be surpassed in this particular, even by those Muslim princes who break the laws of the Quran and forms of almost to bursting that may qualify their love of display, the brutal appetite, I think he said. So saying he's written really well. He says that when the kings are mentioned, because Solomon is presented as a form of a king whom Allah loved deeply, the Holy Quran has mentioned him as a prophet, and they don't use the word prophet for him. They call him a king, the man after God's own heart, that he was according to Allah, the way Allah desired him to be, and that king whose wisdom, whose songs of wisdom were known as his stories, as like folklore across the whole world. So many Eastern countries, that in many Eastern countries he did this, can hardly be surpassed in this particular. Said that king, King Solomon, he from no aspect and no angle did he could not have been less than any man who came after him in terms of how many marriages he did, and those Muslim princes whom you present as having harems, though they cannot match who also break the laws of the Holy Quran, and who try to stretch the traditions of the Holy Prophet ﷺ and try to find themselves permissions, and so much so that they stretch them so far that as if they're broken, and yet they cannot match what Solomon did in terms of how many wives he had. He's also saying that what a beautiful and what a wise matter he has said, that it is the princes who commit polygamy more than the Quran permits are actually breaking the Holy Quran's laws, and they are they try to stretch the permissions, but they don't go according to Islam. And after this, he's saying, he says that the Arabs of the ignorance era allowed any number of wives. The Quran limits the number of lawful wives to 4. It was a remark of Napoleon that Muhammad ﷺ was the only Eastern legislator who ever attempted to impose any restraint on polygamy, a fact which should be borne in mind. See Ayans, modern Egyptian. 121, 128. So they're saying it says 1 and then 121. So the first part of the book in 120 and 100, page 128. And for analysis of the laws of Islam related to him and slaves, the reference he has given of Napoleon is very good. He says that in the time of ignorance of Arabs, they could have as many wives as they wanted. There was no law stopping them. And in the Holy Quran, this has been limited to 4. But here, there is a comment of Napoleon which must be kept in view. Napoleon says that no legislator of the East or and none are mentioned when it says that no Eastern legislator. He means nowhere in the world has any law except for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has attempted to restrain polygamy. It's an incredible and wise statement which the Muslims writers they did not think of presenting in this regard. And because Napoleon was in favor of Islam and he was very much influenced with Islam, so you find very good comments with him, so that he said that there is no lawmaker in the East who had ever attempted to limit the polygamy, number of women, number of wives someone could have, except the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he speaks of divorce. He says that the state of divorce was strange as well, and the cruelty meted out to women. All of that, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought to an end, and made laws for it. Huzur is saying that they alleged the Holy Prophet ﷺ to Huzur is saying they can't say that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was told this by Allah, because if he had said this, then he would have had to raise the question. He could not have raised this question that whether it was the Holy Prophet ﷺ who did it or not. So as a lawmaker, he presents him as a lawmaker, and he removes from him all allegations that are put on him by other people. So saying then after this he talks about inheritance. So saying that there's reference with respect to inheritance. So says I'll discuss it when we discuss that. So we're saying that good people in this country have come who have come and gone. Huzur is saying that these good people, they don't bring them out, they don't bring their comments, etc. out. Huzur is saying that there is another reference on the pandering and all that. Huzur is saying that in response to this nasty things that this person has written, in response to this, speaking of Godfrey Higgins, he has written a book, Apologies for Muhammad, on page 75. He said the simple austerity of daily life, to the very last, his hard mat was for sleeping on, he had plain food, his self-imposed menial work point him out as an ascetic rather than a voluptual something. Sorry. He said about the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he had a very simple life. Austerity is such simple life in which there is no worldly pleasures, and is called a life of austerity to the very last, to the last breath. This was his manner, that he lived as a poor man, his hard mat for sleeping on. His plain food, his self-imposed menial work. He used to impose on him the daily chores of the home. He had to their point rather than a voluptuary, rather than what the commentators, the Orientalists, try to present him as someone who is slave to his self. In most sense of the word, who are saying this has got many meanings, and in most meanings, it doesn't refer to. It cannot apply to the Holy Prophet ﷺ at all. Two things he loved: perfumes and women. This is correct that he loved two things: fragrance and women. The first was harmless enough, um, and the second special case of his wives has a special answer. And if you when you think of his the account of his wives, and you can understand it. Huzur saying that he hasn't understood it properly. Huzur saying that I addressed a Huzur said I addressed a lecture in America. I gave a lecture in America where I addressed this issue. Huzur is saying that Huzur is asking Ibn Jai Sahib if he knows about it. He said no. Huzur is saying that the same subject I discussed, that why the Holy Prophet ﷺ said that I like of the worldly things, I like um, fragrance and women. And I there was a translation which was not well done very well, and then I translated it myself, and then it has been published. And in this society, it is a must that it should be distributed, because it's important, and also it should be translated into other languages in Europe. But says the learned writer we are quoting, Huzur is saying this person, Godfrey, is that his name? Huzur asking. Huzur saying his full name is Higgins, Godfrey Higgins. Godfrey Higgins in this book, he is giving the reference of some other author, and a while has gone. But says a learned writer, we are quoting, so he's been quoting from someone that the learned, he says, and now we quote from him: be it remembered that with his unlimited power, he need not have restricted himself to a number insignificant compared with the harems of some of his successors. I think Huzur said that people should not forget that the Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in that society in which he was accepted as being a prophet, he had unlimited power. He could have wanted to do whatever he could have done whatever he wanted. He could have made whatever he wanted, and he didn't have to put himself for limits on himself. And then the kings after him, they, without any limits, they regarded all kinds of things enough for sufficient for them, and they did not regard harem. They did not limit harem, and their harems, in comparison to that, the Holy Prophet ﷺ's weddings are nothing in comparison. Then the other thing he says is, they're saying that the words are the same. They're saying where I stopped, that's not where the sentence ended. I should restart it. Be it remembered that with his unlimited power, he need not have restricted himself to a number insignificant compared to some of his successors, that all of them, save one, were widows. Huzur saying that he's not speaking of successors, he's speaking of wives, of the blessed wives. He says that you should remember that except for one, all were widows. I mentioned this yesterday anyway, and then one of these widows was endowed with so terrific temper that Abu Bakr and Uthman has already politely declined the honor of her alliance before the Prophet married her. For gratification of women living with a vixen cannot. Sorry, I didn't catch the rest. Zul is saying that I didn't really like him using the word vixen, but when I saw the reference, it usually refers to a fox, but when you they also call someone who is hot tempered as a vixen, and who gets angry at everything. And he says that remember that all of those were widows except one, and one of them was was so hot tempered that the Holy Prophet ﷺ, before she married the Holy Prophet ﷺ, Bakr Zanho and Usman Zanho was presented with their marriage, but they both said no because she was famous for her hot temper. And he said that now tell me that to marry a woman who's famous for this, would you call that as being um, a luxury? Must have some other meanings. You can't say that someone who desires luxuries should sorry, he was saying that because the words he has used are quite harsh, but because he's saying them for the Holy Prophet ﷺ's in his favor, so we can use them. Several of these marriages would have been entered into because those women's husband has fallen in battles of the faith. They had a claim upon a generosity of him. Huzur is saying that I was pleased to read this because yesterday what I mentioned that this could be one of the reasons. One is that an Orientalist who is not even a Muslim, and his character is so clean that the same thing he is saying this about the Holy Prophet as an intention, that it's very clear that he married women who were who were widows whose husband had passed away in jihads in which which Holy Prophet has himself had himself fought, and you cannot. And he thought that it was his first responsibility that he should become their protector, because they became widows because of his teachings. And the same was the subject which who was in the same was the case of Zainab bin Jahash, who was the divorcee of Hazrat Zaid, because she was married to Hazrat Zaid at the instigation of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and Arabs, especially the Quraysh of Mecca, they did not like that their women should marry slaves, and Hazrat Zaid was a slave. Therefore, naturally, there was a hesitation whether it was presented openly or not. So the Zainab, in response to the Holy Prophet ﷺ's instruction, she married Zaid, and when the divorce was about to happen, then the Holy Prophet ﷺ, according to the Holy Quran, he was trying to make Zaid understand that you shouldn't give the divorce. And the commentators, some Muslim commentators, they say that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had he loved her, and he was embarrassed from the world, and he said Allah told him to marry her. Whereas the Holy Quran is saying it very clearly that repeatedly he was trying to make tell Zaid that be fearful of Allah and reconcile with her as far as it is possible. And someone who loves someone, he couldn't have done that So to marry her is the same spirit as that of the marriage with widows, so because she gave a sacrifice for the higher purpose of Islamic teaching. So he therefore he married her. Other marriages were contracted for motives of policy, I think he said. So we're saying that what other marriages are left now? Because except for 8, all were widows, and except for 1, all were widows, and that was Aisha Zanha. So if for marriages he means that apart from that one, this is which could be one of the reasons, one of the aims, one of the reasons from the motives of politics. I think he said to reconciliate the heads of rival factions. Perhaps the strongest reason, one of it, is impossible to overestimate the force that compelled Muhammad to take wife upon wife as his desire for male offspring. It was a natural wish that he should follow in the steps and carry on his work. The desire of male offspring, this is also presenting it as a fact in the Arab society. Then it was very clear that they wanted a male offspring, and in this regard the desire of the Holy Prophet ﷺ that perhaps from this lady I may have a son, this could have been one of the purposes. But Hazur saying these two aims are different, so they'll compromise each other. So at the same time the two cannot remain. On the one hand, the sacrifice that Islamic those women whose husbands had died by acting on Islamic teachings, one of the statuses of their one of the rewards of their martyrdom, they were given this honor that their wives were married to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Then also with that to have the aim of having male offspring. These two things can't go together, it's either one or the other. And the first reason is more closer to the noble character and the excellent example of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And on top, and also there is saying that the Holy Prophet ﷺ's marriages, most of them were occurred when the verse Khatamun Nabiyyin had been revealed, and this is removes this possibility of this allegation against the Holy Prophet ﷺ, which was done with good intention, but it was still an allegation. Hazur is saying that most of his weddings occurred after the fifth year of fifth year of Hijrah. Huzur is saying that the weddings happened after that, because that this what verse says, Ma kana Muhammadan aba sorry, I've missed the verse, that the Holy Prophet ﷺ is not going to be the father of any man like you. And if this certain declaration was made by Allah, and the Holy Prophet ﷺ should continue to marry in order that he may have a male offspring, this is absolutely unacceptable, whether any reference favors it or not. But here this author has not thought of these things in fine detail, but he's saying it because he's pious, and he said this way he could follow it steps and carry on his work. He understands that noble character of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that he had a good character, that he desired a male offspring only so that he could continue his good work, and he should be following in his footsteps. There is indeed, says William, no ground for supposing that Muhammad ﷺ ever contemplated the succession of I didn't catch the prophetical dignity was personal, and his political authority exercised solely, but regarded his children with a loving and partial eye. Be no doubt also, Huzur sings perhaps an E here, he no doubt also rejoiced in prospects dear to every Arab of having his name in memory perpetuated by male issue, and he might naturally expect that his son should be cherished and honored by all followers of Islam. Huzur saying that Muir has presented this with a different twist. He says that this desire that there should be a son was in light of the Arab custom. It could have been because they would have said, they may have thought that my children should be a source of honor for me, and it should be, and that they should honor the Holy Prophet ﷺ. This style, although this is not due to animosity, but it is wrong. It is not due to animosity because before this, the section before this, um, of the Sir William Muir's writing, it proves beyond doubt that William Muir here is not saying it because of some animosity when he says that the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that is Muhammad ﷺ, has never presented any idea or said anything from which this conclusion should be drawn that he wanted to have inherit his children to inherit power. William Muir says that his spiritual greatness was a personal spiritual greatness which could not have been transferred to children. So the matter that Shiites have not understood, at least William Muir has understood it with reference to the character of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and when he said with reference to his character, then there is weight in what he's saying, because if it is only a Christian who has said this, then the Shiites could have said that what does it have to do with us? No matter, Christians are always saying stuff like this, but if a Christian has sorry, that Christian is proving this from the character of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that his character was so great that there is no semblance of any physical desires, and that he did not wish his children to be treated like kings. So this is why Huzur is saying that the last comment is not made with any intention of any animosity. And then the same writer says, for 25 years Muhammad remained faithful to his elderly wife. For 25 years Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu was old and getting older wife. He was completely faithful to her, and you don't find anything in opposition to this. For 25 years Muhammad remained faithful to his elderly wife, and when she was 65, Hazrat Khadija Zanha was 65 years old, and they might have celebrated their silver wedding, and that he could have celebrated a silver jubilee. He was as devoted to her as when first he married her. His relationship of love and his loving relationship was maintained, and during all those years there was never a breath of scandal. In the 25 years, not for a moment was there any time when there could have been even the slightest bit of scandal. A breath of scandal means that there is not even a semblance where there could have been anyone could have attempted any scandal. That means that it's not even mentioned as a breath of air. Thus far Muhammad's life will bear microscopic scrutiny. So this is the time, this is the era where even if you study with a microscope, you will find the Holy Prophet ﷺ free of all defects. Then Khadija died, and though he married many women afterwards, some of them rich in rich and youth and beauty. Just reading this in Urdu. So some were rich in 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 wealth, and some were rich wealth in beauty. But he never forgot his old wife, and he loved her best to the end. He, in that little era that was left afterwards, he did not forget her, Khadija Zanha, for even a moment, and loved her best. He loved her more than all the others that came afterwards. The Holy Prophet ﷺ saying, he quotes that the Holy Prophet ﷺ said that when they called me a liar, she stood by me, etc. And how can I forget a wife like this? That when the whole world was called me a liar, she was the only one who believed in me and who called me a truthful one. And when the whole world was against me, she was the only one who stood by my side, and she favored me, and she continued this with utmost sincerity. And this loving, tender memory of his old wife, laid in the grave, belonged only to his noble nature, belongs only to a noble nature, which is not to be looked for in a voluptuary. What a beautiful commentator said. These words cannot be of someone who is after desires of physical desires. It's with beyond. It's against one's human nature. There's such a great commentary the Holy Prophet ﷺ has made about his old wife, with whom he stayed alone, and about her to say something so ignorant that he should be called a voluptuary, that he was after the desires of physical desires. And after the death of Khadija, Muhammad, like any other man, whether professed, during that period, took several wives until the promulgation of the following. Now he's saying that it's correct that after Khadija Zanha, the Prophet ﷺ married other women, and when Allah's command came that no more, when this command come, when did the weddings happened? He passed away in the year 10 Hijri, and this he married in 7 Hijri, so this command came after that. So it means that practically the Holy Prophet ﷺ's time of his weddings, and the reasons for that was coming to an end, because after 7 there is no other wars that happened which were outstandingly in which martyrs would have been mentioned. And there was the victory of Mecca, and after that the Holy Prophet ﷺ's demise was very close at hand. And this is why at that time the stage of marriage appeared to be. So this was actually Allah was not saying that you will desire it and I'll stop you. It means that now the time isn't here that now there is not going to be any need for any future wives. So saying that it might, but still there might have been martyrdoms at Hunain and other occasions as well. But Huzur said that it was so few days left of his life that there was no question of his marrying again, or it wasn't appropriate for him to marry again. Then it says that he therefore offered the alternative of either gracefully separating So he's saying something about the Holy Prophet ﷺ because of their some of their battles, some of their arguments, etc. Some of them, according to Allah's instruction, He declared that if you want to leave, then leave, and I will give you wealth. I'll give you all luxuries, source of luxuries, and with pleasure you can get separated from me. And at that time, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, what did he do? Then he's talking about that issue that up to that time there were weddings, and after there wasn't. He therefore offered them the alternative of either them separated for himself and enjoying life and his immediate good, which has denied them for long, as they were with him. So I think this is a very important point. He says that to marry the Holy Prophet ﷺ was to abandon worldly luxuries, because a person who is after luxuries, he would not marry he wouldn't marry someone who would then start to go hungry, and they could only get luxuries if they got separated from him. So this is a very beautiful conclusion to draw from this verse, that he's saying with the instruction of Allah that okay, if you want to get separated, then your all your I give you all everything of luxury, so there's no need to worry about anything. If you abandon me, then from the worldly sense you can become much better than you were, which was denied them so long as they were with him, and saving themselves for deprivation and hardship that such a life entailed. And in this way, that they would then be free of the life of hardship, which was associated with the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, because he had such a difficult life that it was very difficult to live with him or remaining with him and practicing benevolence in weal and woe for a yet higher recognition from God. That there was either this choice, and the other choice was not of luxuries. It was that practicing benevolence in weal and woe for a yet higher recompense from God, that they they did not that they should live a difficult they should live a life, whether it was good days or bad days, so for the reason that Allah would grant them a higher reward. This was a choice that the Holy Prophet ﷺ gave them, that is, Allah gave them through the Holy Prophet ﷺ. But they did not, they unanimously preferred to live with him. But remember this tribute, that all of them, although they were given the promises of luxuries, they preferred to live a life of hardship with the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And what kind of luxurious life is this? He has completely annihilated the allegation that the Holy Prophet ﷺ married for the sake of luxury. Could he not then use his husband's just reading it again. He is referring to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. His husband's prerogative, that the prerogative that a husband has, Huzur said that's what it means, but sooner than leave, Huzur said, could he not then use his husband's prerogative of divorcing some even though they may not like it? Now tell me that the prerogative that a man has, that he can divorce his wife could he have used it with even if they denied it, he could have used it, but it would obviously be unfair to deal thus with those loving souls. But it would have been extreme injustice, and it would have been wrong, lack of mercy to those who loved him so much that they sacrificed worldly comforts over for the sake of being with him, and had persisted in throwing in their lot with him, in order, therefore, that their eyes might rejoice in the grieve not, while they are pleased with what Huzur can't find. He's saying that Huzur saying there's many problems in the typing. Huzur saying that it must be thou. It says that their eyes might rejoice, so that if they stay with you, because so their eyes get, this is the soothness and coolness for their eyes, and they grieve not, and they should not grieve separation of his company, and without when they were happy that you could give anything that he could have given them anything that he could. They had no greed, and they had no and they were happy with this. And then after this, there didn't seem to be any reason why the Holy Prophet ﷺ could have divorced them. It became the imperative duty of Muhammad to retain all his wives. So this is the conclusion that one draws, that this is where it ends. So he was saying, this is why I'm presenting it to you in bits, but this is where the sentence ends, that all of these matters for the Holy Prophet ﷺ didn't seem leave any room for him to divorce any of them. The utmost at his do at this stage was to refrain from marrying any more, even on the demise of some of or all of them. He said that at that time he could have done this much, that after this incident he he would not marry anyone else, whether any of them had died or if all of them had died, still he wouldn't have married. This is the question that he has raised. This he imposed upon him as a rule, and this is exactly what it was which he imposed on himself, like a law. Surely this is not, as has been said, that why is the Prophet allowed his followers only 4 wives? He took more than a dozen himself. So those people who he's saying that there is this extreme, it's an insulting thing to say, that he is saying to other people that they should have only up to 4 wives, and himself he had 12. After this, he then mentions the details of the wives, of which category they are, and which ones who were given the dowry, who are mentioned: Sauda, Hafsa, Aisha, Zainab, daughter of Jahash. But they're saying that there's no need for the details of this. If anyone wants to read this book is probably, you can probably get this book. They're saying, what is it? He's asking. They're saying, find out if these books are available. They're saying they can be. These are worth reading. They're saying you should get them. All these were to be retained by Muhammad as lawful wives, and this was a provision. They're giving a reference of a writer who is Bosworth, who is a reference of Bosworth Smith. He was saying that the writer has been mentioned before this. was asking if the discussion of birth has been
अब है
done.
बाइबल की तालीम शुरू से
Now, with respect to the teachings of the Bible, how many weddings were allowed? This is a thing I've already mentioned. This the Bible has not placed any restriction, but I'll put the references before you where for certainty, in certainty this is mentioned in the Bible.
बाप 16 आयत 3
It's Genesis chapter 16 verse 3,
पैदाइश बाप
Genesis chapter 26 verse 34,
पैदाइश
Genesis chapter 28 verses 8 to 9,
पैदाइश बाप 29
Genesis 29 23 to 30,
पैदाइश बाप 30
chapter Genesis chapter 30 verse 4, Genesis chapter 30 verse 9, 1 Samuel chapter 25 verse 40, 1 Samuel chapter 25 verse 43, 1 Samuel chapter 27 verse 3, 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 13, 2 Samuel chapter 11 verse 27, 1 Chronicles chapter 3 verses 1 to 4, 1 Chronicles chapter 14 verse 3, in Kings 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 1, and Kings 1 chapter 11 verse 3. These are the the references we're saying if anyone wants to study them further, and you can this is where polygamy is mentioned in these verses in the Bible. We were saying that there was a discussion that nowhere in the New Testament there is no verse from which that can be derived from which that you should only have one wife. About this, we were saying that I was asking if Fawzi Shah sent this reference. We were saying this is the one in which another reference has been presented in a different there is a reference which they derive something from it, but we were saying it is not the right time to mention that now. But when it is proven about Mary, that about her mother, that she became the wife of a husband who had a wife before that. At this, Jesus' declaration applies to himself more than anyone else. And there's another matter which the Christians do not keep in view, and the Muslim writers have not, researchers have not thought about this either. If you want to look at it from a logical point of view, then according to Christianity, more than one husband was not allowed either. Not only was there a restriction, and as we were saying that I prove this with reference to Jesus himself, and all the priests who sometimes are rude to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and also non-priests, I put this before them so that they not only have a taste of their own harshness, and I ask them for an answer, but they never get an answer. The situation of Mary is very interesting. One of the aspects is that Yusuf, not the first Joseph, but the one who married Mary was already married before, and then he had children, and then when she was married at that time, according to the Bible, she had already had a child from God in her stomach. So then did God have an illegitimate relationship? with her, or was she a lawful wife to God? If she was not a lawful wife, then would you call Jesus' birth? And then why are you fighting with the Jews over this? Then it will be your own point of view would be that this happens in religion. It doesn't matter. But if Jesus' mother wasn't God's wife, then what was the child? Huzur is saying this is not something imaginary. The Holy Quran has taken this up very clearly, and from that was my attention diverted toward this. The Holy Quran says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim." Badi'us samawati wal arz anna. Huzur is asking what the part of the verse is before this. Huzur is saying, I remember it, but right now my attention is diverted from it. Anna yakunu lahu waladun wa lam takun lahu sahiba. The word sahiba is in the meanings of wife. That how can a God have a son when he doesn't have a wife? So if Jesus was the son, then Mary was his wife, because and then when one cannot imagine that God would have an illegitimate relationship with anyone, or that God would marry anyone. But Christians don't understand this, and in order to make them understand, this is a very beautiful point that Allah has described, that how can God have a son when he doesn't have a wife? And the word wife is important because Allah could not have had any illegitimate relationship with Mary. So if there was a son, then she must have been God's wife. So then another point has been raised, that did Allah divorce Mary before she married Joseph, or did she have two husbands at the same time? And they don't recognize, Christians say that divorce is not allowed, because the reference which is being presented here by Fawzia Shah, the main discussion there is of divorce. About Jesus, this point of view is present. This is proven that divorce, Jesus has, it appears that Jesus thought that divorce was haram, was not permitted, and the Jews at the time were arguing with Jesus, and he was not accepting it, and he said no. With reference to the Old Testament, you can't. Divorce cannot happen. Huzur saying in that case, what was Messiah then? He was the son of that mother who married Joseph, who had already had another wife, and he was against two wives. So he was a daughter of that mother who had a relationship, out of some relationship which we do not know. A son was born according to them, and she can be called the wife of God, which the Holy Quran is saying very clearly, that Allah cannot have a son if he doesn't have a wife. If she can be, then the issue of divorce is also raised. But if he did not give her a divorce, then you should accept that two wives are permitted according to Christianity, and so are two husbands at the same time. And if you say divorce, then where would you take this verse? What would you do with this verse that is saying that Jesus was against divorce? So they're saying this is the issue, and this matter is not because is something which is insulting or rude. The Holy Quran, in one verse, it has given, in one word, it has given a brilliant argument in our favor that they cannot escape from it, no matter what they do. And up to this day, Huzur is saying that the ones to whom I have said this, of them, 2 or 3 are with certainty, those people who knock at people's doors, who's saying that the Jehovah's Witnesses, so they were those people, and they are very strict and they're very harsh in these matters. And whenever they have said anything insulting against Islam, I put this question before them, and I have said, tell me, why don't you marry two husbands? Christianity has permitted you. And immediately they get angry and they say it is not, doesn't happen, it is not permitted. And then I put this before them. They're saying they always make an excuse and they run away. There's one case in which who began to bother me every day. The name would be written in Mulaqat that there were some people who were living quite close by, and you could not talk to them. Whenever you gave them a proof, they would become keep insisting that no, this is not this way. They were saying that I told them, this is how I got rid of them. I told them that bring me an answer to this question, and then I will see you. And when I gave them this question, I never saw them again. They were saying that they just disappeared completely. So this is a very brilliant argument the Quran has given us, but you should remember about yourself. You should make sure that you inform people that we regard Hazrat Maryam, Mary, we do not regard her as you regard her. What you regard her to be, the ecological, logical result of that is this, and you are committing extreme transgression against Mary and Jesus, and you are hurting us because we believe Mary to be a pious lady, and she had with the brilliant sign of Allah that she had a baby, and you are presenting a point of view before the world, and that Allah takes on a wife and then He doesn't divorce her and then she marries someone else. And Huzur is saying that among these peoples, if there is a woman who marries someone great, then she doesn't marry anyone else, and it's beneath her dignity to marry someone who is less than them. Although the Holy Prophet ﷺ was not God, but he had such a great status among the prophets that none other attained any higher status than him. So this would be the same. This would be about the Holy Prophet ﷺ as well, but it's definitely about the Holy Prophet ﷺ. It applies to him that after him his wives were not allowed to marry anyone else, and the Holy Quran has ruled it out in the commandment, and when they are called ummahat or mothers of the believers in this regard, although no one can become a son just by proclaiming, because these are things of man's mouths, but when Allah calls someone ummahat, mothers, then anyone else to whom that becomes a mother, she's haram on them, she's not permitted for them. So this is the meaning of these words. And what about God's wife? If you accept that God divorced Mary, then how, Nauzubillah, how could Allah's wife, which Allah calls Sahiba in the Holy Quran, that she could marry someone else? Huzur is saying is such a horrific idea, such a horrific belief which has no basis in the Bible, in the Old Testament or the New Testament. And this reference, Huzur is saying, whether it proves that point or not, it definitely proves this point. Huzur is saying, should I tell you it? Huzur is saying that now that we're discussing it, we might as well. This is Matthew 19:4-5. As far as our research cell has attempted to find that verse which the Christians are presenting in the sense that Jesus said that people should not marry more than one. This was the argument. He was saying before this I had done the research and I could not find any verse. There was one verse which was doubtful, That means that we could have derived many things from it. And what the Christian person Bosworth has written, he's written the same thing. He has said that there is no verse in the Bible which can with certainty be used against more than one wife. He says that in 20 Gospels there is no reference of this, and this reference has been quoted by a Bible, which is by a priest. He replied, "Have you not read that the Creator from the beginning made them male and female, and that He said, 'This is why man must leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two become one body.'" This quote forms the Christian view that Jesus condemned polygamy, or our Lord does not directly forbid polygamy or even allude to the subject. So he's saying that this is another thing. He says that from this we arrive at the conclusion that although our Lord did not directly regard polygamy as being haram or illegitimate, no case of polygamy amongst the Jews is presented in the gospel narrative. But he's saying that as far as the gospel's account is concerned, the Jews' polygamy is not, there is no reference to that, and this subject has been ignored. And when a wife is mentioned, it is stated or implied in the account that she is the only wife. That what has been explained is very clear, or it is implied that a person would have only one wife. He was saying what a flimsy and light argument that they are presenting. They are accepting the Bible, and yet because they have not given the reference, therefore this goes against polygamy. The special evil of Jewish society was the facility of divorce, men putting their wives for some cause which to which Jesus replied in the above quote. The argument was that the Jews were for their wives, that is more than one wife, they used to divorce them with small excuses. They used to see a small excuse and they would transgress against them and divorce them, and Jesus said this against them, against such Jews. Now Huzur is saying that the discussion of Jesus was with Jews was only this, that you give divorce on small excuses, and you have no right to do so, and you forget that the Bible has written in the very beginning that God has made a woman a part of man, and it shows an eternal togetherness between men and women, and this is what has been referred to, that is Jesus wanted this to say this and this was in reference to Adam. So clearly a statement is taken. It appears that there is a life partner, and the same is found in the Holy Quran. Allah says in the Holy Quran that Allah, of all the things that are permitted, divorce is the most disliked by Allah. So don't be quick in giving divorce. And this is what the Bible was saying Jesus was saying to the Jews, that you don't be quick in giving divorce. She should be a life companion. Huzur is saying that these are the people usually use those 4 wives, and then besides that there is no other reference, because the Bible that Jesus accepts, the same Bible, there are mentions of more than one wife, and continuously this keeps going forward. And great prophets who about whom Jesus did not, no one can say anything harsh against, that is Abraham or Isaac or Jacob. Even if you leave Ismail, then these are all the people who have been marrying more than one wives. So for them to say that because they are not mentioned who had more than one wife, this proves that um, Jesus believed in one marriage. This is completely wrong. So the Prophet ﷺ statement is completely um, is certain. Then the Prophet ﷺ said that there is no book, in a holy book in the world, which limits the number of wives, and this is only the Holy Quran that this is done, and this is the greatness of the Holy Quran, the greatness of Allah, that in every regard the Holy Quran prevails over all other religious books. With reference to the polygamy references, Huzur is saying that I can tell you, and there's another reference of the Bible. Huzur is saying is you don't need to go in this. If a man had two wives, one beloved, another hated, all Huzur is saying there's no point in reading these anymore. There's another reference of Chronicles. At the end, Huzur is saying that I will present something before you which has been raised by Very, and he's very cruelly he has stated that in the history of immorality, there were no other countries who were more um, immoral like those people on whom the Muslims had ruled, or in those countries where the Muslim rules, and in this they leave the whole world behind. This is such a horrible and such a lie, such a horrible statement, that if you look at the history, it is completely false, and it can be proven to be completely false, and the actual matter is exactly the opposite. And Huzur is saying that not just with reference to Christian countries, it's in reference to Hindus and Buddhist countries and other people who do not have any religion. That is, even pagans, is the same thing exists. Every man who is living outside of Islam, he is in cleanliness and purity, and in the purity of matrimonial relations. He cannot present a better example than Islam. He couldn't, they haven't been able to, and they shall not in the future. He was saying these are some references. He was saying I shall present before you tomorrow, inshallah. And in this, there are some references of the An-Nisaa, I think Huzur said. Very has forced me to present these before you, and there's some very big, thick books which have been written on this issue, in which there is a priest craft, I think as we were saying, in which very horrific arguments are references are shown, which shows that according to this author, in the religious world, you cannot see example of any more immorality as you see in the Christian, in those people who proclaim that they are Christians, priests, etc., those to whom Jesus' sheep were given. And this is what this book is about, that because other references are extremely harsh, and perhaps for some people it might be hurtful, but Huzur is saying that this is to say that Wadi is a complete liar, and it's exactly the opposite of what he's claiming. So Huzur is saying tomorrow I shall present those references to you, inshallah. Huzur telling Mujahid to take the papers. Assalamu alaikum.